From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
The yeas are 89, the nays are 8. 60-vote threshold having been achieved, the bill, as amended, is passed.
Today's agreement enshrines, I think, a principle into law that will remain in place as long as I am president. The deficit needs to be reduced in a way that's balanced. Everyone pays their fair share. Everyone does their part. That's how our economy works best.
After much drama, the so-called fiscal cliff has been averted for now. We'll look at what's in the Senate deal approved by the House late last night. We'll speak with economist Juliet Schor. Then, after a year of extreme weather, from the melting of the Arctic to a massive drought to Superstorm Sandy, will 2013 be year zero in the battle over climate change?
I think we're closer now than we've ever been to what we need to do. I think we've peeled away the layers of the onion and gotten to the heart of things. As of tonight, we're going after the fossil fuel industry.
We'll host a discussion between Bill McKibben, founder of 350.org, which has launched a nationwide campaign for fossil fuel divestment, and journalist Christian Parenti over the issue of tactics. Parenti's author of Tropic of Chaos, Climate Change and the New Geography of Violence.
If the government allowed the EPA to do what it must do, raise the price of burning fossil fuels, that would help direct private money into renewable energy. It would help put people back to work. So, in the face of this crisis, we have to really think seriously and maturely and creatively about the role of government.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Obama is expected to sign a bill to deter the brunt of tax hikes and spending cuts known as the fiscal cliff that took effect midnight yesterday. A compromise bill passed by the House late Tuesday makes Bush tax cuts permanent for about 99% of households. It allows tax increases of about 5% only on incomes above $400,000 or for individuals, or $450,000 for couples. The deal also extends unemployment benefits, renews tax credits geared toward low-income families, and delays automatic cuts for military and other spending for 2 months. President Obama compromised on the tax issue after initially backing increases on family incomes of more than $250,000. Speaking at the White House Tuesday, Obama claimed the deal as a victory.
A central premise of my campaign for president was to change the tax code that was too skewed towards the wealthy at the expense of working middle-class Americans. Tonight, we've done that. Thanks to the votes of Democrats and Republicans in Congress, I will sign a law that raises taxes on the wealthiest 2% of Americans, while preventing a middle-class tax hike that could have sent the economy back into recession and obviously had a severe impact on families all across America.
House Republicans had initially condemned the compromise bill for not cutting deeply enough into social programs. Still, 85 Republicans backed the bill, bringing the final tally in the House to 257 in favor, 167 voting against. The compromise followed several weeks of tense negotiations between Republican and Democratic leaders. We'll have more on the deal after headlines with economist Juliet Schor. House Republicans have reversed their pledge to take up emergency aid bill this week for states devastated by Superstorm Sandy. The move potentially leaves the $60 billion aid package to die at the end of the legislative session Thursday. The House was expected to consider the bill today, but dropped it following lengthy talks on the fiscal cliff. The decision drew harsh condemnation from both sides of the aisle. Republican Congressmember Michael Grimm of Staten Island, one of the areas hardest hit by Sandy, said, quote, "It's with an extremely heavy heart. I stand here almost in disbelief and somewhat ashamed." Democratic Congressmember Jerrold Nadler of New York City blasted his colleagues for failing to take urgent action.
Hurricane Sandy struck on October 29th, 9 weeks ago. It's unprecedented that it should take so long. I can understand, I would not sympathize, but I can understand with members who might say the amount requested is too much, we should change it, we should quibble with it, we should debate it, fine. But to ignore it, to ignore the plight of millions of American citizens, unprecedented, disgusting, unworthy of the leadership of this House, They should reconsider or they should hang their heads in shame, Mr. Speaker.
President Obama has signed into law an extension of the federal government's sweeping powers to conduct warrantless wiretapping. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act allows for the monitoring of domestic phone calls and emails as long as one of the parties in the communication is outside the United States. The controversial program was set to expire at the end of 2012, but it's now been renewed for another 5 years. An oil drilling rig belonging to Shell has run aground on an island in the Gulf of Alaska, providing what environmentalists say is further proof of the perils of Arctic oil drilling. The rig hit shore Monday night after crew members towing the vessel were forced to disconnect it amid stormy weather. Concerns mounted over a possible spill of diesel fuel and other contaminants on board. The rig's crew had previously been evacuated. Marilyn Hyman, director of the Pew Environment Group's U.S. Arctic Group program, said the incident, quote, calls into question our readiness to drill in such a remote and risky region. The Obama administration needs to impose Arctic-specific safety training and spill response standards. Clearly, we're not there yet, she said. Anti-rape protests are continuing in India after the death of a 23-year-old student who was gang-raped on a moving bus in New Delhi. The woman's ashes were scattered in the Ganges River on Tuesday. Many New Year's celebrations were canceled after she succumbed to injuries sustained in the attack. The case has sparked a nationwide call for reforms to increase punishment for rapists and prevent legal cases from languishing. Hundreds of thousands of people took part in a candlelight vigil to honor the victim and call for the 6 suspects to be punished.
Being a woman, I feel it's not just about these 6 people who have been, arrested. It's about everything that goes wrong against women. It's about child abuse. It's about domestic violence. It's about rape. It's about molestation, eve teasing, and a very simple thing that we can do, both men and women, is that we need to raise our voices.
Gang rape case has shown a light on other instances of sexual violence in India, where one woman is raped every 20 minutes, according to the National Crime Registry there. Syrian government forces are reportedly battling with rebels opposed to President Bashar al-Assad near an airport in the northern province of Idlib. The violence comes a day after opposition groups say 75 people were killed across the country. On Tuesday, government airstrikes hit rebel-held areas of Aleppo as clashes forced the city's airport to shut down. Heavy fighting was also reported near Damascus. On Sunday, UN Arab League peace envoy Lakhdar Brahimi warned Syria's crisis is deepening.
The
situation in Syria is very bad, very, very bad, and the differences are increasing. In that there needs to be a political solution to please the Syrian people and to give the Syrian people their rights, their legal rights, or Syria will turn into hell.
2 policemen in Bahrain have been sentenced to 7 years in jail each for beating an opposition member to death. The victim, Karim Fakrawi, was the founder of an independent newspaper. He died in custody in April 2011. Bahrainis held fresh anti-government protests this week despite an ongoing crackdown against demonstrators. Bahrain is a key U.S. ally, home to the Navy's 5th Fleet. In Ivory Coast, at least 61 people were crushed to death in a stampede following a New Year's fireworks show. Witnesses said police had tried to control a crowd of thousands pouring out of a stadium in the city of Abidjan. Scores of people were injured. Most of the dead were children and teenagers. The fireworks display was planned by the government to celebrate peace after months of violence following disputed elections in 2011. 7 aid workers have been shot dead in Pakistan in what appears to be the latest case of militants targeting health-related groups. Last month, at least 9 volunteers with a polio vaccination drive were killed across Pakistan. Opposition to health efforts has spread after the CIA used a fake vaccination program to help find Osama bin Laden. 5 of the workers killed in Tuesday's attack were young women who worked as educators. The remaining 2 were health workers. A new tally shows the number of civilians killed in Iraq rose in 2012 for the first time in 3 years. The British-based group Iraq Body Count says about 4,500 civilians were killed in violence last year. The group said in a statement, quote, "The latest evidence suggests the country remains in a state of low-level war, little change since early 2009. Iraq Body Count's figure is more than twice the number given by Iraqi officials who claim violence is actually dropping. On Monday, at least 23 people were killed, 87 wounded in a series of attacks across Iraq. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has called for harmony with South Korea in what's believed to be the first television address by a North Korean leader in 19 years. In a speech broadcast on New Year's Day, Kim made no mention of the country's controversial nuclear program and said the economy is North Korea's top priority.
An important issue in putting an end to the division of the country and achieving its reunification is to remove confrontation between the North and the South. The past records of inter-Korean relations show that the confrontation between fellow countrymen leads to nothing but war.
In Chile, 8 former army officers have been charged for their role in the murder of protest singer Victor Jara 40 years ago. Jara was arrested and tortured after the U.S.-backed overthrow of elected President Salvador Allende. His hands were smashed so he couldn't play guitar before he was shot more than 40 times. A Chilean judge has now ordered the arrest of 2 officers believed to have committed the murder and 6 others who allegedly acted as accomplices. Human rights lawyer Nelson Caucoto discussed the significance of the decision.
It is historical for this country when people like Victor Jara, and additionally, all of the other victims of the dictatorship, can have this possibility that a judge can reach this level of the process and pinpoint the responsibility of the army officials.
Bolivia has nationalized the operations of Spain's largest utility company, Iberdrola. Buildings occupied by the energy firm were seized by Bolivian authorities last week following orders by President Evo Morales, who said the move was made to ensure equality.
We consider this measure necessary to ensure equitable energy tariffs in the departments of Oruro and La Paz so that the quality of electricity service is uniform in rural and urban areas. This measure guarantees equality to the citizens who live in rural areas and ensures their income with equitable tariffs and a quality and uniform service.
Venezuelan Vice President Nicolas Maduro has visited President Hugo Chavez in Cuba, where he's been suffering from complications after recent cancer surgery. In a television interview, Maduro attempted to assuage rumors about the president's health, but gave little specific information about his condition.
During these days, I was able to see President Hugo Chavez twice and speak with him. He's completely conscious of the complexity of his post-operative state, and he expressly asked us to keep the people informed, always with the truth, regardless of how hard it may be.
Pope Benedict spoke to thousands of followers in the Vatican Tuesday on a day recognized by the Catholic Church as the World Day of Peace. Among other topics, the Pope addressed the issue of economic inequality.
Although the world is unfortunately still marked as hotbed of tension and conflict caused by growing inequalities between rich and poor, from the dominance of a selfish and individualistic mentality, also expressed by an unregulated financial capitalism, as well as various forms of terrorism and crime, I am convinced that the many works of peace, which are abundant in the world, testify to the deep sense of humanity for peace.
In New York, a woman has been charged with murder as a hate crime after allegedly pushing a man to his death on the subway tracks because she believed he was Muslim or Hindu. Erica Menendez reportedly told authorities, quote, "I pushed a Muslim off the train tracks because I hate Hindus and Muslims. Ever since 2001, when they put down the Twin Towers, I've been beating them up," she said. The victim, 46-year-old Sunando Sen, was a Hindu born in India. He was cremated on Monday. A Wisconsin state senator is drawing ire for his comments against the holiday of Kwanzaa. Republican State Senator Glenn Grothman released a statement titled, quote, "Why must we still hear about Kwanzaa?" He wrote, quote, "Of course, almost no black people today care about Kwanzaa, just white left-wingers who try to shove this down black people's throats in an effort to divide Americans," he said. The comments drew outrage from local Democratic leader Meg Moen, who called them jaw-dropping and said, quote, not only does Senator Grothman seem to defined as inherent racism acceptable. He implores people to follow his lead and question a holiday that African Americans have been celebrating for years. In a victory for civil rights advocates, North Carolina Governor Bev Perdue has issued pardons of innocence for the Wilmington 10. The group of mostly African-American activists were falsely convicted and imprisoned for the firebombing of a white-owned store in the 1970s. Their pardons in the waning days of Perdue's administration follow a campaign to unequivocally vindicate the Wilmington 10 after their convictions were overturned by a federal court decades ago. Newly surfaced documents show the prosecutor in the case made racially based notes next to potential jurors, writing comments like KKK good and Uncle Tom type. In a statement about the Wilmington 10, Governor Perdue said, quote, "These convictions were tainted by naked racism and represent an ugly stain on North Carolina's criminal justice system that cannot be allowed to stand any longer." Wilmington 10 member Ben Chavis appeared on Democracy Now! Last week before the victory to talk about what a pardon of innocence would mean.
A pardon of innocence would mean that the state of North Carolina finally realizes that the trial, the unjust arrest charges were all racially motivated, politically motivated. And now it's time, 40 years later, for the state to remove this pain from the members of the Wilmington 10, from the community of Wilmington, and from the state itself. It's been an albatross around the state's neck for over 40 years.
And finally, leading environmentalist Rebecca Tarboton has died at the age of 39. Becky was the executive director of the Rainforest Action Network and advocate for human rights. She died in a swimming accident in Mexico while on vacation. Rainforest Action Network said in a release, quote, "Tarboton was the first female executive director of RAN and a strong female voice in a movement often dominated by men." Rebecca Tarboton appeared on Democracy Now! In May to talk about RAN's campaign against Bank of America.
RAN is involved in Today with Bank of America specifically because climate change is the most real and present danger that we have to the environment and to people all around the country and the world. And Bank of America is the lead financier of coal in the country. And in particular, coal-fired power plants, for instance, are the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, which is the cause of climate change and climate chaos. So we're here very specifically to say to Bank of America, look, you need to get out of coal if you're serious about this, or if any of us are serious about this country transitioning out of fossil fuels and into renewable energy.
That's Rebecca Tarboton. She has died at the age of 39, the executive director of the Rainforest Action Network, in a swimming accident in Mexico. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Nermeen Sheikh. Welcome to our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.
Thanks so much for watching this report from Democracy Now!, your daily independent global news hour. We don't accept advertising or corporate funding, but rather rely on donations from viewers like you. Please make your contribution by visiting democracynow.org. We need your support today to keep bringing you this hard-hitting, in-depth reporting.